There is a place called California that has nothing to do with the United States. Most people, when they hear that word, picture one thing: surf, sunshine, Silicon Valley, Hollywood. They picture a US state. But there is another California, older, stranger, and almost entirely forgotten by the rest of the world. It hangs off the western edge of Mexico like a long, thin finger pointing south. It is surrounded on one side by the open Pacific, and on the other by a sea so biologically rich that Jacques Cousteau once called it the world's aquarium. Its name is Baja California. And here is something most people don't know. Baja had this name first. Spanish explorers named this peninsula California in the 1530s, inspired by a popular adventure novel of the era, a fictional island of treasure and warrior queens. The U.S. state of California inherited that name 3 centuries later, when it was taken from Mexico in 1848. So technically, the real California is Mexican. But the name confusion is only the first layer of the story, because when you look at Baja on the map, you see what appears to be a long stretch of desert hanging off the edge of a continent. What you are actually looking at is something far more extraordinary. You are looking at a piece of North America in the process of tearing itself away. Baja California is slowly becoming an island. And the story of how and why touches geology, ecology, climate, and the lives of the people who have chosen to live at the edge of a continent coming apart. To understand what is happening beneath Baja California, you have to think on a scale that is difficult for human minds to hold. We are talking about millions of years. We are talking about forces so slow they are invisible in a single lifetime, yet so powerful they have reshaped entire continents. Around 12 million years ago, the Baja California Peninsula was not a peninsula at all. It was simply part of the Mexican mainland, attached, solid, unremarkable. Then something began to happen beneath it. The East Pacific Rise, a massive underwater mountain range stretching from Antarctica toward North America, was pushing the Pacific tectonic plate northwestward. And the edge of that plate was pressing against the soft underbelly of western Mexico. The crust began to stretch. It cracked. A rift opened, a long, narrow tear in the continent, running roughly north to south. Seawater poured in. By around 6 million years ago, active seafloor spreading had begun, and what we now call the Gulf of California was taking shape. The whole process, geologically speaking, happened fast. Most ocean basins take 30 to 80 million years to form. The Gulf of California did it in somewhere between 6 and 10 million years, making it one of the youngest ocean basins on Earth. And the separation is still happening. GPS measurements show that Baja is drifting away from mainland Mexico at roughly 2 to 5 centimeters per year. That is about the same speed at which your fingernails grow, imperceptible in a human lifetime, transformative over millions of years. The closest analogy to what is happening in Baja California is happening on the other side of the world, in East Africa. There, the African continent is being split apart by the East African Rift System. Geologists believe that in millions of years, a vast strip of East Africa will detach and become a new island. Baja is the same process, further along. It is already separated enough to create a sea between itself and the mainland. It is a continent mid-tear. And what makes this especially remarkable is that Baja is technically still attached. The northernmost tip of the peninsula connects to California and the broader North American plate. The peninsula is being pulled in one direction at its base, while the top remains anchored. It is, in the most literal sense, a landmass coming apart at the seams. Some geologists estimate that within 20 to 30 million years, if the process continues, Baja and the western edge of California could fully detach, creating an inland sea where much of the American Southwest now sits. That is not a prediction. That is a trajectory. The Earth does not ask for permission. The Gulf of California exists because Baja exists. That sounds simple, but its implications are enormous. The Gulf is a narrow, enclosed body of water. roughly 1,130 kilometers long and, in places, less than 90 kilometers wide. It sits at the northern tip of the East Pacific Rise, which makes it geologically active in ways that most seas are not. Hydrothermal vents on the Gulf floor release minerals and heat that feed extraordinary ecosystems. The combination of that geothermal energy, nutrient-rich upwelling, and extreme tidal forces has produced one of the most biologically diverse marine environments on the planet. Jacques Cousteau's description, the world's aquarium, was not exaggeration. The Gulf of California is home to more than 5,000 species of invertebrates, over 900 species of fish, and serves as feeding and breeding grounds for blue whales, fin whales, humpbacks, sperm whales, and orca. It is one of the few places on Earth where you can reliably encounter every major whale species in a single body of water. The tidal forces within the Gulf are extreme, particularly at the northern end. Where the Gulf narrows near the Colorado River Delta, tidal ranges can exceed 9 meters during spring tides. That is almost the height of a 3-story building, rising and falling twice a day. It churns the water, mixes nutrients from the seabed to the surface, and drives a productivity that feeds millions of animals and millions of people. Parts of the Gulf of California are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The IUCN has described its island chain as the Galapagos of North America. All of this exists because a continent started tearing apart. Without the rift, without the separation, without Baja drifting away from the mainland, there is no Gulf of California. There is just more desert. But the same biological richness that Cousteau celebrated is now under extraordinary pressure. The vaquita, a small porpoise found only in the northern Gulf of California, is almost certainly the rarest marine mammal on Earth. In 1997, scientists estimated there were around 567 of them. By 2024, that number had fallen to somewhere between 6 and 8 individuals. The 2025 survey offered a cautious flicker of hope. Between 7 and 10 animals observed, including at least 1 or 2 new calves. The vaquita has not been hunted directly. It has been killed as bycatch, drowned in illegal gill nets set for totoaba, a fish whose swim bladder fetches enormous prices on black markets in China. A species found nowhere else on Earth, in a sea that exists because of one of the planet's most dramatic geological events, pushed toward extinction by a black market trade. Baja California is approximately 1,250 kilometers long. At its widest, it spans around 250 kilometers. At its narrowest, you can drive to a ridgeline and see the Pacific on your left and the Gulf on your right. This is a landmass barely wide enough to cast a shadow. And yet within that slender corridor, 3 entirely distinct climate zones are compressed end to end. The northern end of the peninsula, just across the border from San Diego, sits in a Mediterranean climate. Cool, wet winters, dry summers, chaparral scrubland, vineyards, olive groves. It feels, in places, more like southern Portugal than Mexico. Move south, and the Mediterranean zone gives way to something harsher. The central spine of Baja, the Sierra de Baja California in the north, the Sierra de la Giganta in the center, runs like a backbone down the peninsula. These mountains catch what little moisture the Pacific sends their way. What remains on the Gulf side is almost nothing. The central desert of Baja is among the most arid environments in North America. Annual rainfall in some areas falls below 50 millimeters. But this is a desert, unlike the monotonous sand plains most people imagine. The Sonoran Desert that extends into Baja supports an almost surreal diversity of cacti, including the cardon cactus, which can live for centuries and grow taller than a telephone pole. And then, near the southern tip of the peninsula, the climate shifts again. The Cape region around Los Cabos is subtropical, warm year-round, occasionally brushed by Pacific hurricanes in late summer and autumn. Palm-lined arroyos, tropical dry forest, turquoise water. It is a different world from the desert 500 kilometers to the north. This climate compression matters biologically, because the arid central desert functions as an ecological barrier almost as effective as open ocean. Species on one end of the peninsula have been isolated from species on the other for millions of years. Add to that the fact that the peninsula itself has been gradually detaching from the mainland, and you get the conditions for evolutionary divergence. Baja has dozens of endemic species, animals and plants found nowhere else on Earth. Distinct subspecies of mule deer, pronghorn, bighorn sheep, and rattlesnakes. Reptiles that diverged from their mainland relatives as the Gulf widened. Plant communities that have been evolving in geological isolation for millions of years. Baja functions ecologically more like an island than a peninsula, which, as it turns out, is exactly what it is in the process of becoming. The Baja California Peninsula covers roughly 143,000 square kilometers, an area comparable to Greece. In 2020, its total population was approximately 4.5 million people. By comparison, Greece has around 10 million. The reason Baja is so sparsely settled for its size is simple. Water. Fresh water is the binding constraint on settlement in almost every part of the peninsula. The rivers are few, seasonal, and often dry. The aquifers are limited. Rainfall is insufficient for agriculture across most of the territory. So people clustered where water could be found, imported, or manufactured. And almost all of them clustered at the extremes. The northern state of Baja California, centered on the border cities of Tijuana and Mexicali, holds about 3.7 million of the peninsula's total population. Tijuana has grown into one of the most visited border cities in the world, a place that processes 100,000 cross-border crossings daily and has developed a manufacturing economy anchored in maquiladoras, assembly plants that export northward under trade agreements. Mexicali, the state capital, sits in a desert valley where summer temperatures routinely exceed 45 degrees Celsius. It should not be a city of 1 million people. It is one because of the Mexicali Valley, an irrigated agricultural zone dependent on water diverted from the Colorado River, water that was committed to Mexico in a 1944 treaty and has been fought over ever since. This is irrigated desert farming at massive scale, and it works only because of infrastructure decisions made decades ago, now under increasing strain as the Colorado River shrinks upstream. The southern state, Baja California Sur, is a different story entirely. It covers more than half the peninsula by area. Its 2020 population was just under 800,000 people. That is a population density of roughly 5 people per square kilometer. The economic engine here is not manufacturing or agriculture. It is tourism. Specifically, the Los Cabos corridor at the peninsula's tip, which receives millions of visitors per year. Los Cabos is built on an economic model that imports almost everything: the food, the fresh water, and in many cases, the workers. It is a luxury tourism economy perched in a desert at the end of a very long road. Which brings us to the road itself. As recently as 1973, there was no continuous road connecting the northern tip of Baja California to its southern tip. Communities along the peninsula's length were functionally isolated from each other. Supplies moved by sea. Travel between towns required days of navigating unpaved desert tracks. The peninsula that looked connected on a map was, in practice, a chain of isolated outposts. On December 1st, 1973, President Luis Echeverría of Mexico officially opened the Benito Juárez Trans-Peninsular Highway, known today as Federal Highway 1. The road runs 1,711 kilometers from Tijuana in the north to Cabo San Lucas at the southern tip. It was built from both ends simultaneously, crews working south from Tijuana and north from Cabo San Lucas, meeting somewhere in the middle of the desert. The event was marked with a ceremony at the 28th parallel, the geographic boundary between the two states of Baja California and Baja California Sur. A 140-foot eagle monument was erected at the spot. The highway changed everything. It enabled the tourism economy of the South. It connected local communities to regional markets. It made Baja California Sur viable as a Mexican state. It was only granted statehood in 1974, the year after the road was finished. But the highway also illustrated something important about Baja's geography. Even with the road, the peninsula remains profoundly isolated. Highway 1 is 2 lanes for most of its length. It is narrow, winding, and crosses some of the most remote desert terrain in North America. Even today, driving the full length of Baja takes the better part of 2 days. The geography that makes Baja unusual, the narrowness, the aridity, the mountain spine, also makes it difficult to live in and difficult to connect. Return now to that image. A long, thin strip of land on the western edge of Mexico. You see it differently now. The gap between Baja and mainland Mexico is a fraction of a centimeter wider today than it was when you started watching this video. The peninsula that Spanish explorers named after a fictional island in a novel, mistaking it for something it wasn't, is slowly, steadily becoming the real thing. An island. It will just take a while.